Okay.
All righty, we're live. Let's see if it works this time. We've got Maura Moynihan on again. You couldn't hear her last time. And so it's 04 April here, 2020. I'm in Chiang Mai, Thailand, and Maura is in New York. And she had some very important things to say, but nobody could hear her. Let's see if they can hear you this time, Maura.
Hi, Michael, and hi to all your wonderful listeners. I hope you can hear me now.
We'll know soon. It'll
Did
take a
that
little
work?
while for people to check in and say hello. Uh, let's just go with as if they do, and please start if they can.
Okay.
What you were saying was actually let's give them a couple minutes to get in, uh, um, uh, and talking about a few things that are going on here in Thailand. And Mark Streppenbach says perfect. So and when Mark and Richard says yes,
Good.
good. So actually,
Okay.
let's let Maura take off here. Go ahead. What's going on in New York?
Okay. Thank you, Michael, for having me on your show. It's the most important story in the world. We've been saying that since January, but now I believe people realize that it really is a matter of life and death now. And New York City, my hometown, is sadly the epicenter of coronavirus, a CCP virus, shall I say, cases in the United States. And the latest figures are very upsetting because, as the virologists and doctors warned 3 weeks ago, we're following the curve in Italy. And we have at least 100,000 known cases in New York State. The death toll has now surpassed 3,000. And in New York City, which is roughly the same population size as Bangkok, 8.5 million people, but much more density than Bangkok in people, concentrated more on the islands and in high rises and so forth. You can't really socially separate very effectively in a very dense urban environment like New York or Hong Kong or Tokyo because everybody shares elevators and the doorman and the food delivery is still going on. So the cases are now coming in New York about one death per minute. And I was just looking at some alarming footage from the New York Daily News, New York Post, of body bags wrapped up, lining the corridors of New York hospitals, looking just like what Italy looked like 3 weeks ago, and images that we're getting out of Wuhan in January. Now we're seeing this in New York. But unlike communist China, in Italy and in the United States, we have open societies, we have a free flow of information, we have a free press, we have democracies, maybe bruised and battered, but they exist. We have a constitution. In China, there are none of those things. And as quickly as the coronavirus spreads, the CCB virus, it's poison, and it's catastrophic effect on the global economy and on world health. I'm also seeing an abrupt change in the mainstream media narrative about our good friends, the communist Chinese. Now, not on every station. Of course, MSNBC's loathsome Rachel Maddow is to this day still promoting all this pro-China narrative and beating up on the U.S. and saying they can't do anything right. And the USS Comfort, the naval hospital ship, would never arrive in New York. Well, it arrived on Monday. It came into New York Harbor on Monday. And my brother John was a merchant marine on that ship 30 years ago when it was the Rose City. And it gave hope to the people of New York. And Governor Cuomo is setting up tent cities in Central Park for COVID cases. And but where I'm seeing like the Financial Times and the Wall Street Journal, not the New York Times, because they're so pro-China, because they take color page ads every week from China Daily, the propaganda wing of the CCP. But I'm seeing, especially in the financial news, anger towards China for lying, for covering this up. American intelligence now has strong evidence to convict China for crimes against humanity, for lying and for covering up the severity of the CCP virus. And private citizens have also filed lawsuits against the CCP to hold them accountable. It's happening in Europe as well. But people, very wealthy New Yorkers that I've known my whole life, only 2 months ago, I was arguing them about Should they have their money in China? I said, why would you put your money in a country that has at least 5 million that we know of, 5 million inmates in an enormous concentration camp system, a government that tortures a child for having a plastic Dalai Lama pendant, or for an old man for reading the Quran in his home if he's a Uyghur, or for a Chinese poet or free thinker or philosopher who criticizes the regime. Even wealthy princelings are not safe from the murderous reign of Papa Xi Jinping. In fact, Comrade Wen was disappeared last month for openly criticizing Xi Jinping. He's said to be in a black site in Beijing being tortured. And a lot of my intel from Asia, and let's talk more about Indian intelligence and Indian news, it's always ahead of the game on nation China, way, way more than the West. Do they know who the Chicons are? They've had to fight the Chicons in the 62 war. They give shelter to the Dalai Lama, so they don't have any illusions, no rose-colored glasses in India. Thank merciful God. But the disappearance of Comrade Ren, who was also a princeling like Xi Jinping, has caused a lot of anger within the ranks of the CCP. And my friends in Indian intelligence published reports and told me privately, it's very telling that Chinese intelligence allowed this information to get out to the Indians. There was a high-level secret meeting in Beijing last week of a group of princelings about how to get rid of Xi Jinping, how to remove him, how to take control of this catastrophe that Communist China has leashed upon the world. So that means there is not harmony and there's not concord inside China. But the New York Times will tell you there is. And so I urge all your viewers, as I did last time, to watch for Chinese Communist talking points in American media. Mostly it's coming from Washington Post, New York Times, MSNBC, particularly Rachel Maddow. So watch, take notes, and write letters. Express your displeasure. Ask them which side are they on. Are they on the side of the American people or the side of the CCP? And they better pick soon. Right, Michael?
Absolutely. On picking sides on this, I mean, not picking sides is picking sides, as you well know. You and I have been, look at you, you were arrested in 1994 demonstrating in front of the Chinese embassy in Washington, right? On Tibet issues, of which you're an expert. And by the way, Maura speaks Tibetan. And, well, that's an interesting story in and of itself. But you are way ahead of the ball game on this and have been on it just like a Wolverine for how many years?
Since 1973, when I was a high school student in India, and I met Tibetan refugees, and I learned of the Chinese communist occupation of their homeland and the genocide of at least 1.2 million Tibetans out of a population of 6 million, possibly 2 million, maybe more. And the Chinese armies, when they came to Tibet, looted and burnt to the ground over 6,000 Buddhist monasteries, the repository of a great Buddhist civilization for 1,000 years. For 1,000 years. And a lot of the gold of the statues was melted down into bullion. Precious Buddhist scriptures were used as toilet paper. Statues of the Buddha were chopped up and used as rubble for walkways and sidewalks and so forth. And all of these things are deliberately done to desecrate the Buddhist faith, because in the ancient Pali scriptures, from the time of the Buddha, the 6th century BC, when he lived in India, it is said, do not deface holy objects, do not deface scripture, and also do not harm members of the Sangha, of the Buddhist Sangha, monks and nuns. Another thing the Chinese communists were very fond of doing, and are still fond of doing when they come into it, they're doing it now too, is forcing monks to break the vow of celibacy and copulate publicly, a monk and a nun in front of troops of jeering PLA soldiers, and then they would shoot them to death. These are our good friends, the CCP, that Wall Street, that the Bushes, the Clintons, Obamas, Bloomberg, Schwartzman have all assured us are so sophisticated. They can do everything better than we can in our messy democracy here in America. Well, I think the wheels are coming off this story pretty fast. Wouldn't you agree, Michael?
Absolutely. I mean, we can see now that the CCP has poisoned the world and hit it. And whether or not they weaponized this from the very beginning, whether or not this really came from the lab is unknown to me. But what is actually quite clear is that they have now weaponized it. If it wasn't intended as a weapon, they're definitely using it as a weapon now. And you were mentioning some things before about Taiwan and Philippines and Japan. Why don't you mention those again? This was when people could not hear what you were saying.
Oh, sure. Now, this, as you know, Michael, being an expert in the Chinese Communist Party and having the kind of concern that I have, that they play this
Maura,
very tricky game.
Maura.
Yes, can you hear me?
I can't tell if you're moving away from your microphone backwards and forwards, or if it's our connection.
No.
If you can keep equidistant to your microphone.
Okay. Sorry about that.
Sorry about that.
Right? No, that's okay. Please let me know technical difficulties. We want your viewers to hear everything.
Right.
Now, it's typical of the CCP. It is the Chi-Com playbook that when there is some kind of crisis domestically, start a war, strike a foreign country, start a military skirmish to whip up nationalism at home, to flood the airwaves and the newspaper headlines inside China with, evil Uncle Sam is trying to attack China. All citizens must rise and push back against the devil America. They did this during Tiananmen Square. And there are lots of very poignant stories of soldiers who were taken from distant parts of China and bussed into Beijing in June of 1989 to shoot their fellow Chinese citizens because they were told America had invaded Beijing and they need to protect China from the invading Western army. And some of these soldiers were able to escape and get refuge in Europe and America and have given very poignant interviews. Like last year was the 30th anniversary of the Tiananmen Square massacre. Passed with a whimper, hardly noticed. But I did read some of these poignant interviews with the soldiers saying, we were duped by our government. We were made to shoot and kill our fellow Chinese brothers and sisters. I feel shame and disgust for what I did. I will never be able to make it right. But what I want to do is alert the world to the criminal, evil nature of the Chinese Communist Party. Now, if they're saying it, shouldn't we listen to them? So what's happening now? The Red Star Rising listserv that you and I are both on, and my friends in Indian intelligence, I was on the phone with them last night and the night before, say there's some alarming signs that the PLA, the People's Liberation Army of the Chinese Communist Party, is getting ready for some kind of military strike. They just sank a fishing boat out in Vietnam. They have been very aggressive promoting skirmishes in the Philippines, around Japan, and they're still building those islands in the South China Sea that they claim to be Chinese territory. And my friends in Indian Intel, of course, always know if they're going to strike from Tibet. Because for centuries, India had an uncontested border with Tibet. It's one of the longest borders in Asia. And for centuries, it was monks, traders, nomads coming down to trade and going back and forth from India to Tibet. But since 1959, since the flight of the Dalai Lama to India, you got PLA battalions all along that 2,000 kilometer plus border. And they have the high ground. Genghis Khan said, he who controls Tibet controls the world. And when you go to Tibet, you can see that is true. You're on the high ground looking down at planet Earth. They've got drones, they've got missiles, they've got battalions that can strike Southeast Asia and South Asia in short order, 20 to 30 minutes. They can rain down missiles on New Delhi, Dhaka, Bangkok, Rangoon, Vientiane, you name it. So everybody be alert and be aware. Another very alarming thing that Micah and I were discussing the other day is that the coronavirus is now spreading to the American military. Certainly the New York City Police Department, they have 500 cases in the NYPD and in the fire department. So with the military grappling with the crisis at home and the infection of our soldiers, perfect time for them to strike. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. Back in January, I was mentioning back then, this is a huge threat for our military. For instance, when it gets onto our ships and even submarines eventually, if we don't take precautions, that it could make them certainly less battle ready. And we've just seen that with the aircraft carrier Theodore Roosevelt. Now, it's not like the U.S. military never foresaw this. Many people keep saying nobody could have ever foreseen this, but many people have. For instance, I've had masks for years. I didn't even have to buy masks. I mean, I bought 600 masks to hand out to people, but I already had them. And so, but even with the military preparations for this, it's still real. I mean, you can be prepared and know that missiles are coming in, but it doesn't stop that missiles are coming in. And so now this biological demon is certainly affecting our military. And listening to Jack Maxey, by the way, on the War Room, I'm of his mind, actually. I do believe I want our military to help as much as they can. However, our military needs to be ready for real external threats at this point, because this is actually a war, and we actually must prioritize and keep a lot of things safe, like sea lanes right now, as opposed to getting our military deeply involved in combating within the United States, which is really important. However, that's not the only wolf at the door. We've got real wolves, Chinese Communist Party, outside the door, and we need our military ready to fight, guns up, guns a-blazing if needed. And we can't do that if we pull them in.
No, of course. And you served your country with distinction for a very long time, and you were embedded with the troops, so you know better than anybody what it takes to be battle ready. And I know all my years working for Radio Free Asia and in the Tibet movement, again, Tibet has always been the best lens through which to view the CCP and how they're going to move and how they roll and what they're planning next. And in 2000, there was a white paper that was leaked from Beijing. We got a hold of it early and had it translated from Mandarin into many languages, where they said that we're going to go to war against America, but we don't want to do a standard kinetic war. We're going to do it from the inside out. We're going to use economic theft. We are going to penetrate with propaganda, and bioweapons were not ruled out. And there's a book that Steve Bannon tells everyone to read. It's now I'm forgetting the name. Remind me. The Chinese Military Manual.
Oh yeah, I've actually got it and I've read
the CCP book.
Yeah, I've read so many though. There's the 100-Year Marathon is by Pillsbury, but that's not the book that you're talking about. I've read that one as well. The 100-Year Marathon actually. It was actually Bill Gertz that recommended to me to read 100-Year Marathon. We were having dinner alone actually in Tokyo, and we were talking about China. This would be about 4 or 5 years ago. And right whenever that book came out, 100-Year Marathon, Pillsbury, and I picked that up. And I think Steve Bannon has recommended that one as well. But there's the other, China has, it was written by a Chinese colonel actually in the PLA. And the Chinese colonel, I mean, it's unrestricted warfare. Unrestricted warfare. Right. Unrestricted warfare. And it's a very, very good book to read. And basically it's a full spectrum war. Everything, information war. They're huge on it. That's why I've written 3 books on Chinese information war. That's my 3rd one. It came out about a month ago. It's only in Japanese. But I mean, the information warfare is massively important. That's like 5 carrier battle groups. To be dominant in information war is to be dominant in space. I mean, it is a war, winner or loser, on who controls information battle space. You can't understate that. A lot of people don't realize how important information warfare is and how deep it goes. Like you mentioned the New York Times earlier, and I've mentioned them many times for their, clearly in bed sometimes with CCP, and other times they write articles that make them look like they're on the other end of the spectrum, but it's also clear that they're compromised. Another battle space that CCP tries to dominate quite a lot is the Wikipedia hilltop. It's like he who owns Wikipedia, or at least can influence Wikipedia, that's a major hilltop in information battle space. That's why when people send me Wikipedia links, I'm like, look, if you want to get blocked, send me another Wikipedia link. Look, I don't, you know what I mean? It's like I don't block for much, but I mean, that's like, You know, it's so easy to load the deck on Wikipedia, and here's how you do it. They have journalists that are pro CCP all over the world, all over the United States, and historians, quote unquote, in universities. They write articles, they get them published somewhere, or they just work at a newspaper like New York Times, and then the Wikipedia editors put those in the Wikipedia links, inside the Wikipedia stories, and then when journalists who are not supposed to be looking at Wikipedia use Wikipedia, they're using a poison chalice, right? I mean, they're drinking, they might as well be drinking arsenic. I mean, because Wikipedia is like on the comfort women issue and so many other issues that are hugely backloaded. Anyway, I want to hear you talk. That's why I called you up, Maura.
Oh, well, I love listening to you talk. And I ask all your viewers, don't stop supporting Michael, his Patreon account. I'm a donator to his Patreon account and support his work. You will get the true story about the Chinese Communist Party, which has declared war on the world. You will not get this in mainstream American media because of two factors, as we were just discussing. One, the New York Times, Washington Post, they're all compromised because for years they have been taking full-page color ads from China daily. And they always treat China with a soft touch, and they push this insane and erroneous Russiagate narrative. Russia is responsible for all the ills in our society, when it really is China. And the news also, I mean, while the insane impeachment hearings locked up the whole U.S. government to their desks until the middle of February, both the mainstream media was playing along. There was not one story about the coronavirus from CNN or MSNBC, CBS, ABC, none of them. And I'm watching this in horror in Manhattan. And I'm saying to people, hey, guys, don't you think this story of this virus coming out of China is a little more important? And they looked at me like I was crazy. And up until just about a month ago, the lockdown started in New York, second week of March. I was having polite but heated arguments with wealthy people that I know in Manhattan who were vigorously defending communist China and vigorously defending their decisions to invest in communist China. And this is something I want your listeners to know because, again, New York Times, polluting with the CCP, covered it. It was a one-day story buried in the back of the business section in November. There's a fund that controls $500 billion worth of American pensions. That includes you, Michael. That includes anyone who served in our armed forces. It also includes teachers, firemen, policemen, my father's staff at the Senate, his retired secretary, the lovely Vicky, who gets her pension from the U.S. government for working in the U.S. Senate all those years. Well, a bunch of gangsters on Wall Street was trying to invest this $500 billion, I mean, the amount is staggering, into Hike Vision. Hike Vision is a PLA military stock. Its main order of business is surveillance cameras, and they've tested them in the concentration camp system in Tibet and Xinjiang. In distant parts of Western China where there are no diplomats, there are no journalists, there is no press, nothing. And they can get away with murder. And they have for the last 60 years. And, I asked people going around New York, do you know about this? And they just kind of roll their eyes. There she goes again. There's Maura on another one of her rants about China. Well, she's got to grow up and get a life one of these days. Well, they're not saying that now. My phone has been ringing off the hook with people in terror because their stock options, their stocks have disappeared, and now they're frightened of getting the coronavirus and dying. So I'd like to remind all your viewers that this sellout to communist China didn't happen overnight.
No, it did not.
You can't get your medications. It happened over time, exactly. And it was bipartisan. The Bushes, Clintons, Obamas, Bloomberg, Schwartzman, they're all guilty. The people who stood up, so few cared for so long, so few cared. My father, Jesse Helms, Congressman Gilman. Now we have Senator Rubio. We have Senator Hawley. We've got Senator Scott from your home state of Florida, Michael, standing up and pushing back. But I don't see any Democrats. They're all Republicans. Where the hell are the Democrats on this? I guess they all drank the Clinton Pelosi Kool-Aid, right, Michael?
Oh, yeah. This is, for instance, most of our pharmaceuticals are made in either India or China. And India has recently cut us off, not for any malice, but because they need them, because the infection is running rampant through India right now. And so India needs it for India. And so a huge amount of American pharmaceuticals, 80 to 85% from what I've read of U.S. pharmaceuticals or their active pharmaceutical ingredients come from China. And so China can cut those off right now. So everybody that's going in for surgery that needs something that's made in China, like penicillin, by the way, there's no penicillin made in the United States. I don't actually know where it's all made, but there's no penicillin made in the United States. Any drugs that you need. That's why I've been saying since January, if you need any pharmaceuticals to live, get them now. I've been saying that since January and all through February and
right.
all through March.
You did.
Right. And so and now it's a little too late if you don't have, it's not necessarily too late, but for a lot of people, it's too late. And so if you can get pharmaceuticals that you need to keep you alive, longer, prescriptions, now's the time to do it. Because at any second, China can cut those off.
Well, yes, Sarah Gibson, who wrote the book China RX, which I urge all of your listeners to try to get your hands on. It's apparently sold out on Amazon now.
You can get it on ebook. I got it on ebook. You can get it on ebook.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Oh, good. Okay. I have a hard copy sitting right here on my desk. I'm looking at it. But in any case, Rosemary researched this book for several years. It came out in 2018, and nobody paid attention. Unsurprisingly, I know we presented evidence of torture and genocide coming out of China's concentration camp systems. Nobody cared. Nobody paid attention. And she is now being listened to. And in her book, you will find a lot of very alarming, very well researched, very well written. The last penicillin factory in America was in my home state of New York, Syracuse, New York, where my younger brother was born many years ago. And it was closed.
Your brother, John?
My brother, John, who was a merchant marine on the ship that is now the USS Comfort that just docked in New York City. He was born in Syracuse in 1960. Well, that was the last penicillin factory. Upstate New York used to have some of the best scientific research and development in the world. It had Polaroid, Kodak, Corning, IBM. That was all in New York State. Well, thanks to the Clintons and the Bushes, all of this went to China. And Rochester, Buffalo, Syracuse, Albany, our great upstate cities, are now broken shells of what they used to be. And you visit them. I mean, last year I was in Syracuse and I burst into tears. Broken down, empty storefronts, people addicted to fentanyl, which comes from China, lying in the street in the middle of the day, no jobs, no dignity, no income, no stability in our society because of the sellout by the global elites to communist China. Now, once we get through this pandemic, which we have to do, the next order of business is to rout out the collaborators and the appeasers in the West who allowed this to happen, who up until very recently were praising communist China. I've been keeping score. I've been keeping screenshots. I've been keeping a timeline of just how many times NBC, ABC, CBS, and the New York Times have been praising communist China for how terrific they've been on the coronavirus. And they got it all together. And wow, they can do everything better than our messy, awful democracy and our insane, crazy president. I mean, their hatred of Trump is just unpatriotic and seditious at a time like this. For example, 2 days ago, Trump gave a press conference and CNN deliberately cut away every time the president came to the podium and only went back, it was Dr. Fauci or Dr. Blix. And one very interesting exchange was between President Trump and some reporter from CNN who has to play gotcha, has to be snarky and wants to get points by, stripping the president. They say the president is dumb and he's evil and he's crazy. I mean, would they like to go live in China? I'd like to put them on a boat to China right now. So anyway, this reporter kept trying to say, "You've lied. You've given people false hope. You're this, that," and the president was very good with him. He said, when you insult me, you insult the whole U.S. government. I'm the head of the U.S. government. I have a wonderful team. He pointed the people from FEMA, from the military, from the doctor, the medical staff, doctors. He said, every time you insult me, you're insulting them too. And the reporter got rather shaken, I could see. But, they again, the coverage is smug and nasty. And what I find absolutely infuriating is intelligent people with expensive educations that I know in New York. They're sitting around calling it the Trump pandemic. They go, excuse me, this came from China. The president's doing his best, whether you voted for him or not, isn't important right now. He's our commander-in-chief, and he's trying his best. And by just spending all day spewing hate for the U.S. government, you look foolish. You are foolish. We have an open society. We can share information. We can mobilize. In China, they can't do any of that. Just wait till the second wave comes. Just wait till a second wave of infected. Oh, and here's a story I want to tell. And then I have a question for you, Michael. This is very important. Again, the criminals on Wall Street. I asked your listeners, as I did last time I went on your show, Google the U.S.-China Business Council. You can sign up for their free daily email, which I have been doing for years. Comes into your inbox. And it is shocking to see the narrative that they promote. They work for the CCP. These are Americans. They're American citizens holding American passports. And they're just pushing that Trump is evil with these tariffs. It's so terrible. And we've got to help communist China stay on top. So I urge all your viewers to do that. Another fun Twitter handle is AmCham Shanghai, American Chamber of Commerce Shanghai, full of gangsters and thugs who only at the end of January, I got screenshots of one James McGregor, who used to run AmCham Shanghai, lives in Shanghai, said, oh, there's just so much blather about human rights in concentration camps. We're just going to ignore that. Oh, really? What if it was your mother, your daughter, your son, or your father being tortured in a concentration camp? I think you think differently. I just want to share this. Here it is. U.S. exports of certain ventilators.
You're breaking up a little bit, Maura.
Geared to China.
You're breaking up a little bit. Actually, let me reintroduce you because many people are asking who you are, but they're already saying I love you, but don't know who you are. Okay, this is my friend Maura Moynihan.
Okay. I love you too.
And I can listen to her for hours, and I have many times. Like I'll call her up and just like want to hear what she has to say. But Maura Moynihan, she grew up part of her life in India because her father was the U.S. ambassador to India when she was a teenager. So she got to roll around India, which is, I divide the world into two countries, India and the whole rest of the world. And Maura got to grow up there. I can't, and her dad was an ambassador. So that's when she got to meet Tibetans, right? When she was a teenager. So then her dad was a senator. He was a very famous senator, Senator Moynihan. He was very well respected on all sides of the aisle. And she's actually quite well respected here in Thailand. Maura's spent a lot of time in Thailand and a lot of time in Nepal and India. And she worked with Tibetans and she's friends with His Holiness the Dalai Lama. And she's very serious. And as you can see, extremely well educated and super passionate. And so I've asked Maura to please come on and just like have her own show on my pages. And Maura is actually going to do it. And so that's who she is, Maura Moynihan. And the reason she sounds like she knows so much is because she does. And I listen to her very closely. I want to go back to you, Maura.
Oh, thank you, Michael. And also, I want to tell all of you to support Michael's Patreon account.
Oh, thank you, Maura.
Simply nobody in Asia. It's true. He works so incredibly hard. And you won't get better information from anywhere in Asia than from Michael because he knows the ground. He's on the ground. Right now, with all the travel restrictions, we can't go to Asia, but you can listen to Michael and you'll get the truth. And right now, that's what we need. And now here's a story that I wanted to share about the criminality of the financial elites who took your job or your neighbor's job or your relative's job, sent it to communist China, thereby depriving your community of dignity, work, and uh, financial survival at a time like this. They are responsible. Here is a story that I find absolutely alarming. It's in USA Today. I don't think the Times has published it because they work for that gang. U.S. exports of surgical masks, ventilators, and other medical gear to China skyrocketed in January and February when the coronavirus was wreaking havoc in the country where it began. And as U.S. intelligence agencies warned that it would soon spread. American companies sold more than $17 million worth of face masks and $13 million in surgical garments and $27 million in ventilators to China in January and February. And now we have a shortage. So now we have a shortage. And I want people to start going after the criminals here in America that let this happen. It's far more difficult for us to go after the Chinese Communist Party. I mean, I've spent my life doing it, writing about them and mocking them and attacking them, but they're half a planet away. But we can go after the criminals right here in this country that have worked hand in hand with them. Now, notably,
Maura, let me just say something very quickly. The two books, because Carl asked, which are those two books that Maura mentioned? And those are China RX, that's on the prescriptions. It's a very good book. I've got it. And Unrestricted Warfare, a very important book. I've got that one as well. So it's Unrestricted Warfare. That's written by a colonel from the PLA, People's Liberation Army, Chinese Army. And then there's China RX. And Maura's got both as well as do I. I've read both. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but there's quite a...
No, not please interrupt anytime. Required reading, everybody. And you can also find interviews with Rosemary Gibson on YouTube. She just did a very good one with American thought leaders that Michael and I have both been interviewed for. Hers just came out this week. I recommend it very highly. But now back to...
Oh, was she on American Thought Leaders?
Score.
Was
Yes, she just did
I've got to watch that. I love American Thought Leaders. You and I both were on there, and now she's been on there as well. The author of China RX. It's a great book. It's a very important read. Rosemary Gibson, Barbara. Barbara said Rosemary who? It's Rosemary Gibson. Rosemary Gibson, and she wrote China RX. It's extremely well written. You must read it. You're going to be pretty surprised, to put it lightly.
Oh, terrified. And I also have been telling everyone I know, if you need meds, better get them now.
Yep.
And again, I met with quizzical stares, rolled eyes. Oh, Maura, knock it off. You and China, you're a broken record.
Exactly. See, that's the way. Listen, because when you and I first met, whenever that was, long time ago in Thailand, and, it sounds like what you're saying is crazy, but I know it's true because I was studying it too. And I think to people around us, they're like, those two are crazy. Like we're like two birds chapping at each other, And I'm like, no. This is live fire. This is really game on. And now, unfortunately, I mean, this is the kind of thing that you want to be wrong about, but we knew we weren't wrong. And you were on it like 20 years before me. I mean, you were on it. No, you were on it longer than that because you were a teenager in India, of all places.
Well, that's where I met the Tibetan refugees and His Holiness Dalai Lama. And I learned of the genocide of the Tibetan people. And it's an ongoing genocide, by the way. They've won on the ground in Tibet. And so what I've always told people is one thing I learned all my years in the Tibet movement is don't think the CCP can't win and don't think they won't play dirty.
They play only dirty.
Right, Michael?
They have unrestricted warfare and no rules. It's no rules Sunday. You know what I mean?
Yes. Well, this goes back to something I really want to discuss with you, with your knowledge of the military and knowledge of Asia. I've been asking friends in recent days because now a lot of my friends in America who listened to me warn about China but didn't really take it seriously, but in the back of their head, they were more was always going on about this. I've been getting floods of calls and emails from friends who are frightened because this came very quickly. I mean, it just suddenly overwhelmed America. Do you think the Chinese Communist Party unleashed this virus on purpose? And my answer is, well, we'll know in the fullness of time because Michael, as you've told me before, military intelligence will at some point be able to analyze the virus to determine whether it came from the Wuhan bioweapons laboratory. It seems so aggressive and so contagious that some doctors I know in India are saying it's unlikely that it could have just sprung from the wet market. I mean, it has all those elements. But whether they did it on purpose or whether it was negligence, either way, they're culpable. Either way, they should be held responsible, and their cover-up and their lies, that alone can be prosecuted for crimes against humanity and for damages. Now, I'd like to talk for a moment about a presidential candidate, Michael Bloomberg, the mayor of New York. Mayor,
Oh, you're breaking up a little bit, Maura, just a slight bit.
Oh, can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
Got it.
I'm in the Catskills. It goes up and down. Anyway, Michael Bloomberg always dreamed of being president, and he spent $900 million to win American Samoa. Gee, that's great. Now, he said he was going to fund this great big super PAC to bring down Trump and blah, blah, blah. Well, just as the lockdown came in New York 2.5 weeks ago, the school closures, the restaurant closures, everything, Michael Bloomberg announced rather quietly, and this is a man who loves publicity, he decided he was not going to fund a super PAC, and he's gone into hiding. And I'm hearing from a lot of my sources, that's because he's so frightened about the billions of dollars he has tied up in the Chinese Communist Party. He's one of their biggest boosters. When he was mayor of New York, it made me sick to my stomach, the way he would constantly throw parties at the mayor's residence in New York, Gracie Mansion, for Chinese Communist Party bosses who think nothing of torturing children and shoving electric cattle prods into the mouths of Buddhist monks and old men in Xinjiang and young Chinese poets. And he often said things like, I wish we had a one-party dictatorship in New York. It'd be easier for getting things done. That's not funny. And he didn't intend it as a joke either. And up until recently, he was saying China should rule the world. He was even trying to get the international currency standard pegged to the renminbi of communist China over the U.S. dollar, which means he's a traitor and he should be tried for sedition. So I asked your viewers, do a little Googling. Just put in Michael Bloomberg, China. He's very close with Wang Qishan, number 2 in the CCP, Xi Jinping's number 2 man. You'll find lots of pictures of them in a warm embrace. In fact, last fall, they were going to have a big Bloomberg summit in Beijing, but they decided to move it to Singapore because Mike Bloomberg was running for president, wanted to tone down his close ties to China a little bit. Well, he's in hiding now, and so are a lot of the big defenders of communist China. I don't see the Clintons anywhere. I don't see the Bushes, Clintons, or Obamas offering to part with any of their lavish fortunes they've made because they were public servants, something my father, by the way, never did. He never cashed out. He died. Well, he never left a fortune to me. That's okay. I wouldn't want to be anyone else's daughter. But all these other people became multi-millionaires. And I don't see any of them stepping up to the plate and offering to donate money, to buy masks, provide money to people who've lost their jobs. 10 million Americans have lost their jobs in the last 2 weeks. So, wow, we really are at war with China. And so watch the collaborators, watch the appeasers. They're all in hiding now. In fact, one friend of mine who works on Capitol Hill said he heard some of them are already in bunkers or they've gone to some island in the Pacific. Well, lots of luck. We're going to be waiting for them when this is over with pitchforks. Right, Michael?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this is a reckoning time because we are at war, and there's going to be fundamental and organic changes within the United States and within Europe and within many countries. I don't know exactly what's going to happen here in Thailand, but certainly this is going to affect so many people so fundamentally in the United States, again, with about, as Maura mentioned, as you can see on news reports, just millions and millions of people who've been put out of work, just probably people that are right on my page right now listening to us who just lost their jobs just in the last couple of weeks. And it's only going to get worse. Now, I've been to a lot of countries with hyperinflation and that sort of thing. Maura has as well. And, as I was saying a couple nights ago, if you've got like a penny bank. Now's the time to count out all your coins and go cash those in and buy something with it, because probably coins won't have any value soon. I've seen this happen in other countries. I'm not saying that to scare people. I'm saying that to say this is the new reality we live in, and we've drifted into this reality because businesses, not just politicians, but the businesses and politicians for years, in cahoots with journalists and whatnot, have drifted over into the CCP camp. We've put huge amount. Apple. I'm using Apple iPhone right here on a computer from Apple. These are manufactured in China. It's unbelievable. Actually, if I could rewind the tapes, I would not be using Apple products at this point. I mean, it's unbelievable. But how can we? For instance, I just bought two coffee cups, right, in America, and just with the stuff written on them, interesting stuff. And because I wanted to, show you a cup of coffee with beat CCP, right? So anyway, they've been delivered to my address in Florida, and somebody sent me photos of them. On the bottom of them, it says "Made in China." They're coffee cups. I mean, you can't even buy a coffee cup in the United States. It's not made in China. It's just unbelievable. And your drugs, all these medications, as you know, Maura, you've read the book by the China RX by Gibson, and she talks about in there that the FDA cannot even inspect the factories in China. So all these drugs that you're taking, or your parents are taking, or whatever, not even inspected in most cases, not inspected at all. You're just taking it on CCP's word.
Well, yes, and you remember there again, mainstream media covered it up. There was a scandal a few years ago of heparin, which is a medication used when people are having heart operations. Heparin from China, it was adulterated, it was tainted, and many people died because of the tainted heparin. But that didn't stop the big pharma from continuing to do business with China and loading them up with the world's medical supply. Well, this reckoning is coming down the pike very, very soon. And back to your point you just made, this is very important. In times like this, it is important to have cash on hand. One of my father's bodyguards at the NYPD told me many years ago, honey, always have as much cash as you have hidden in a shoebox somewhere in the house in case banks fail or ATMs fail. And so I've been telling everyone, try to get at least a minimum of $2,000, $10,000 if you can, in your house. So you will have some cash on hand. Because, the banks in Italy are starting to fail. The internet is beginning to fail. The phone lines are beginning to fail. Now, that could happen here. I hope it doesn't. But we can't rule any of this out because it's really beginning to now, just as the doctors warned us that it would. And again, go on the Walmart website and post your comments, express your displeasure when you were talking about cheap junk made in China. Well, I hadn't been into a Walmart in years and years and years. In the early 90s, me and hits in front of the Walmart outside of Washington, D.C. with the Tibetan flag and with pictures of murdered Tibetans with their bodies having been tortured to try to shame people. And, I don't think it really had much of an effect. But the reason we did all these things is just so there was a record that somebody did something, that not everybody was a sheep and not everyone lay down and looked the other way. And now we feel vindicated in the worst possible way because of this dreadful pandemic. So anyway, I go into a Walmart in Kingston, New York, a few months ago, and it was eerie and it was bizarre, and everybody kind of looked like they were zombies, kind of floating around. And they're even getting rid of jobs. Everything's automated. I turned over almost every product made in China, made in China, made in China, and at such cheap prices. Now, how is it possible to pay $1 for a packet of matches that says made in China? How can that cost $1? What was the carbon footprint of flying them halfway around the planet? Because it's all being subsidized. Now, this ugly, dark story is going to come out. And again, I urge your viewers to read the work of Gordon Chang, our wonderful friend Gordon. And
He's
Michael
great.
Is a frequent
He's a
guest
mutual
on the John
friend.
Batchelor Show. He's great. He wrote the book, The Coming Collapse of China, years ago. That's how we met. I hunted him down. I said, I'm your fan. And Michael's a frequent guest on the John Batchelor show, an excellent show. And Gordon's being proven right. And
He is.
Gordon is out there every day trying to
I'm
warn
retweeting him
people.
all the time. I'm retweeting Gordon and you like 3 times, 5 times a day, or whenever I see it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Good. Now, I want to just alert your viewers to another course of action while you're in quarantine. Use your time effectively. And there aren't that many organizations in America that protest and call out the Chinese Communist Party. I think I described when I was on your show last week just how impossible it is for a Tibet person, which I am, which I've been branded as, next to impossible for us to get work. We've been blackballed, ignored. All the top humanitarian and human rights organizations in New York City have told me again and again, we can't work with you, Miss Moynihan. You're a Tibet person, and our board members have interests in China. And you can get all the money you want to beat up on penniless little countries in Africa that have no GDP and no stake in the global power game. But you can't get a penny to pick on China. So my friend Ben Rogers, who's based in the UK, who's a brilliant, wonderful crusader. Michael, I can't wait to introduce you to one day you're of the same mind. He is a leader at the wonderful international human rights organization, Christian Solidarity Worldwide, CSW. Just Google them. They do work all over Asia. He also runs Hong Kong Watch. And Ben and I were together when I went to England in November, and I interviewed Honorable Chris Patten, the last English governor of Hong Kong. And Hong Kong Watch has an office in Washington, D.C. They don't have a lot of support. They don't have a lot of numbers, but you can Google them. You can write to them. You can ask, what actions can we take? What petitions can we sign? What can we do to hold the Chinese Communist Party accountable for destroying our economy, killing our citizens, and in their attempt to take over the world? And I was emailing with Ben last night. I told him that I was going on Michael's show. And he brought to my attention another important story. There are some brave Catholic cardinals in Asia who are standing up to the CCP at great personal risk. In particular, Cardinal Bo of Burma, a country which borders Thailand, of course, that Michael knows very well. Cardinal Charles Bo is the Archbishop of Yangon, and he has braved China should be held accountable for the spread. I'm quoting him now. As we survey the damage done to lives around the world, we must ask who is responsible. And there is one government that has primary responsibility, what has been done and what was failed to be done, and that's the CCP regime in Beijing. Let me be clear. The CCP, not the people of China, that must be held responsible. He's right.
You're breaking up a little bit more.
Oh, hi. He's right. Well, so anyway, and Mike, I'm afraid I'm going to have to jump because
No, you can't leave yet.
Messages.
You can't leave yet.
Oh,
Everybody, I want to hear more. I always hate hanging up the phone with you. So, all right.
Oh, well, let me stay on for 10 more minutes. I'll tell you why I have to go. I will come on. My little niece, my beautiful, sweet 23-year-old niece, Maura Moynihan, is in Los Angeles. She has just contracted the CCP virus. She's frightened and she needs a mask.
Your niece
has
has
to
it.
Go to the. Yep.
How old did you say she is?
So she's 23. So
20,
please don't
23.
think it only gets old people. Exactly. So I have to go mail her a mask because I have extras because I stocked up. But again, I urge all your listeners, use your time productively. Take, if you're quarantined, you're at home, take some time to go on the CWS website, Hong Kong Watch website, show your support. Write to MSNBC, write to Walmart, write to the New York Times, and ask them why they're colluding with the Chinese Communist Party, which has infected and poisoned the world, and Americans are now dying by the minute in New York City because of them. My rage is now exploding, and I want revenge.
Maura.
Don't you?
Yeah. Yeah. And one place to get good information on that is, can you say your Twitter, which is what I follow, and you have a new website? Can you say that? People are asking. I don't actually follow your Facebook. I follow your Twitter. That's what I watch. I look at your
Oh,
Twitter every
sure.
day.
Yes, yes, yes. My Twitter is more explosive than Facebook because I have friends on Facebook who have all drunk the CCP Kool-Aid and the Clinton Kool-Aid, and they don't want to hear it, and they attack me, and so I've been actually spending quite a bit of time unfriending people and blocking people in the last 3 weeks. But on Twitter, I have all these wonderful friends in Asia and Chinese friends who are supporting me. But my new website is www.Maura Moynihan 1957. That's all one line. That's MauraMoynihan 1957.com. You'll find a lot of my archived work over many, many years about the Chinese communist occupation of Tibet. And go to my art, the section of artwork, and go to collages and comics. You'll see my new artwork where I'm going after the CP and mocking them and ridiculing them and their Western collaborators. And that's the project I'm most excited about. But Michael, I'm getting a lot of urgent phone calls from my son, and I've got
Okay.
I'm afraid it's an emergency. Let me call you back if I can get back on the line, okay?
Definitely. All right, Maura. I'm going to say your website again on my microphone where it's better. It's Maura Moynihan at 1957.com. Maura Moynihan at 1957.com. And Maura's gone. So, as you can see, that's why I like to get Maura on, because so usually we're just chatting offline and we never go online at all. But she's quite brilliant, actually, and that's just the patina there of what she's actually. She's been around the world quite a lot, and yes, Tommy, she is more than a tigress. She's a straight up warrior, and has been for years, and taken very serious chances in India and other places because CCP hates her so much. All right, now if there are any specific questions, I'm going to take them there now, and take them now. And by the way, and Jeff, I see I have to mail her a mask, but it is what she said, isn't it? And so if you have any specific questions for Maura, you might want to look at her Twitter. I follow her Twitter, but I don't know what her Twitter is. You know what I mean? Because it comes into my feeds here. And good Lord, I don't even though I look at her Twitter every day, I don't even know what it is. That's terrible. But you know how though it just automatically comes in. But you can find her on Twitter, Maura Moynihan, or if you have any questions for her, maybe go to her website, Maura Moynihan 1957.com, 1957, Maura Moynihan 1957.com. Her stream is over, but that's it. Thanks, Georgina Madigan Stoner. And let's see if we can take any questions here. If not, I'm going to go ahead and jump myself and study some more. I want to read up more about what's going on here. There are, let's see, what is her Twitter handle? Lisa is asking. Good Lord, I don't even know. Oh, there. Even though I look at her Twitter every day, I don't know what her Twitter is because it comes in. I get those auto feeds. Let's see. Let me see if I've got any from her here. But she's been online with me for a while. So, here she is. Here is one of her. It is at Maura Moynihan. I'm trying to see it here. I can't show you this because it's got a lot of private messages from her, and I don't know if it's okay to show them. But anyway, I think it's at Maura Moynihan 1 is her Twitter. At Maura Moynihan 1, number 1, not written 1, but number 1. She is awesome. She's quite well respected in many circles. And the sort of people that you see on television all the time are her running mates. A lot of them don't like her now because she's like me. I mean, we are just like, we are super hawks on CCP compared to, we were considered radicals, until 2 months ago. Now we're not considered radicals, especially as of a couple of weeks ago. Now we're probably considered, velvet touch. But but we have been considered radicals for years on China, and that's why I've written 3 books on Chinese information war. That's my 3rd book. Just came out in Japan. If you speak Japanese, please buy it. That's on Amazon.jp. It's Amazon Japan, and you can buy it and on ebook or on paperback. Yeah. So, all right, let me go ahead and there it is. There's Maura Moynihan. Thank you, Kelly Jansen, for finding it. And I'm going to go ahead. No, I wasn't using bleach on it's just, that's the way it comes. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and punch out now. A lot of studying to do. Mic out.